Greetings to all you creeps in the chat. I saw your comments. I was watching. I saw you all trolling me on my own stream. How dare you? How dare you? You dare. You dare. You dare to be here and you dare to indulge in the art form that is comic books and the extensive, never ending discussion of that art form. So, welcome. Welcome to this stream where we do indulge. And we have quite a few indulgers with us. Let's jump into the chat and see exactly what you guys have to say. Citizen Ronan is here. Welcome. Always great to see a new face. So he says, hail, everybody. We got Snuggy Jr. It's always hailing the chat. Good to see that. Let's see. KSSS enjoyed the show. Well, thank you. That's it. That's all we have for tonight. So good night. Good night. Good night. Yeah, we're just getting started, KSSS. You better strap in. So oh man, you should hear the conversation that was happening in the back. This one is going to be one for the record books. So yeah, get your get your pillows, get your neck warmers, get your blinders on. You guys are ready for quite the adventure into comicdom. Who else do we have? We've got scrolling down. Music is loud. I apologize, Twitless. I did my best. I readjusted several times, and just unfortunately, I couldn't quite hit the exact right amplification. So I do sincerely apologize for that. Who else do we have? Jav, Thylor, Creep Gay Remix. Quite a rebuttal in the chat. You guys, so brutal. This is what I came here for, though. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for my regular lashing. Quite appreciate it. We've got Elasmat. He says, good evening, everyone. Yeah, good evening, Elasmat. Good to see you here. Appreciating the great music that that I prepare for all of you, saturate you with. KSSS says, leave it to Well Read to ask, which version of Creep should I play instead of the safe for work version or the one that's not? He chose the gay disco version. Will this make you a cutter? Absolutely. But wait, there's more. So let the cutting begin. Yeah. What are any of us doing here, Michael? Quite true. Quite true. Matthew Fowler. Always great to see you in the chat. I hope you'll be dropping some of your hot, spicy takes. I'll be reading them out, definitely. So do tell what you thought of the book. As we go through it with our panel, Hojo is here. He says, hail, I'm here for comics. You came to the right place. What the hell is wrong with you? But that's what we do here. We talk about comics books extensively. Carol Colors. Hey, everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, so we've got the whole chat, covered. The lineup is ready. Let's get the panel on here, guys. Let's get this fiasco started. Tonight we're talking about Lost Pages 3, Phil Diaz's book. So Phil Diaz, he's got his nose to the grindstone, and he's putting together a pretty good long-running series, and it's been pretty well received, fairly popular. Lost Pages, people enjoy it, and this one is no slouch compared to the others. The crowdfunding was pretty strong, and the storytelling is, well, you'll just have to wait and see. We'll be talking about that tonight. But yeah, he's been known to put out quite a number of series. So Phil is definitely a creator to keep your eye on. He's quite prolific in these circles, and he's successfully putting out books, which is a monumental challenge for a lot of people. Just getting your first book is hard, but Phil's done quite a number of them. So definitely going to enjoy talking about a work that's a little more seasoned. He's been at this for a number of years now. So it's interesting to see how far he's grown and how much he's grown on the panel. So with that, let's bring on our panelist, known for growing on you in places that you'd rather nobody sees. Please welcome Twitless.
Hooray. Fungus among us.
Yes, I made a fungus analogy.
All right.
Are you impressed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, somebody who's always impressed with everything I have to say. Please welcome Doc Blaylock.
I was promised food. There's no buffet back here.
Mm.
The fuck, man.
The dog ate it all.
Jeez.
Yeah, Twitless brought his comfort animal, unfortunately. So, yeah.
I felt like the comfort animal during that conversation backstage.
Don't worry, we're all here to comfort you, Doc. Somebody who's a great hugger and a great comfort to us all. Please also welcome Aldous.
Yes, thank you for that wonderful introduction. If I am known by anything, it is the depths of my compassion and empathy. So I appreciate that. And Doc, I warned you in the pre-show not to sit on the couch, man. You never should have sat there.
You didn't warn me about that exact spot. I mean, Jesus Christ, man.
If you stay away from the side of the room that Twitless is on, everything's fine.
Gain hitting just a bit high, Doc.
I shall attempt to remedy that.
Yeah. You got a fan on in the back too, maybe?
Oh God, I forgot. Well-Red's a sound Nazi.
I mean, it's fine. We could just hear the power generator.
Yeah,
I'm just here in the deep south where it's 120 degrees. Pardon my air conditioning.
We'll do this. We'll do the review at the bottom of the ship,
you be
in the hull.
All right, is that better?
Oh yeah, way better.
All right.
Now we just hear the sound of Twitless's heavy breathing.
You can just hear the nerd synapses popping.
You can hear my imaginary friend.
Well, that's
at least you have one.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of imaginary friends, let's jump into Lost Pages. I, of course, did not bring up the campaign because I'm slacking today, but give me 2 seconds. I know how to get it quick.
It's a good time you had absolutely no chance to prep for the show, man.
Yeah.
Right.
I excel at that. So here we go. Lost Pages 3 on Indiegogo. The funding, of course, is closed, but there is a link on Indiecron, and you can still pick up the books there, apparently. So I did drop the link for Indiecron in the description. People should go check that out and see if they can find their way to Zaid's store. I'll put it in the chat too. And you can probably get a copy of Lost Pages 3 if you so choose. So not too shabby, 579 backers, 43K. So by indie comic standards, that is a success.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these books, they don't, I mean, how many books do you think crack 2K or 3K?
Right.
So 43K, that's not too shabby. That's why he's got a long-running series going. So 3 issues in, and people are enjoying the ride. And what a ride indeed. So came with a Kenneth Rocafort piece. There's a trading card, which is quite sweet. Yeah.
Very nice.
Makes me regret backing the digital, but, live and learn. Ken's got a unique take on Crimstone, too. What do you guys think of this character, Crimstone? He's the mainstay, I believe, throughout all of the Lost Pages books. Would he be the title character, you would say?
I would say so. If there's a standout character, personality, and visually, it's him.
So how many people on the panel have read all the Lost Pages?
I have. I own, and I guess that's a precursor to a not a word of warning, but perhaps an addendum to this. Is I have met Phil in real life. I consider him a friend, and I've read everything he's done. I will say this, though. I do tend to be a little bit harder on the people that I consider my friends because I try to avoid any bias. Now, when you say what is Crim, Crim, I think, is a really fun kind of blend of, you can see a little bit of Phil's love for Pitt and Hulk in him, but there's definitely a lot of Sam Keith the Max going on here, and it's a unique, twisted take on it. I feel that he's taken something and doing a unique take on it, much more so than Pitt was to Hulk, right? I think it's fun. It's very indie. He's got a really different sense of style, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Michael quickly asks if we're also going to be doing The People. Not tonight. We decided to just focus on Lost Pages, but The People will be available on a future review. We've already
Did we review The People once already?
We did the first one. He actually had the second as
Oh.
part of this campaign. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that was up for discussion. So yeah, what did you think of the character Krim Twitless? Did you get vibes of
Definitely
Sam
got the
Keith
Max.
and-
I definitely got the Max from him. Yeah. That goes for color scheme, I think, a bit too.
Yep.
My feeling on the character is I think the idea of the character is really, really solid, and I'm on board with it. I have problems with the execution of that concept.
You're kind of an old school comic guy, Doc, right? Like you came up
I
in the
am.
Silver Age. Yeah.
I did, yes.
Were there ever any characters like Crimstone back then that you can remember?
No, not that I can think of. Some of the supernatural stuff kind of leaned that way, but there were no over the top. I heard you guys mention Pitt and oh shit, just went out of my head.
The Max.
Yeah, the Max. And to me, I felt like there was a little touch of Lobo in there and a little touch of Venom, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the villain of the piece is very Venom and Carnage.
Yep.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yeah, and the concept though was like Twitla said. We were talking backstage. I like the idea. It was a little hard to wrap your brain around what was going on, but if I just went with it, and it kind of explained itself toward the end.
So you weren't left at a loss. The story did wrap itself up nicely
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and it was a good read in spite of, like, if you couldn't grasp what was going on, the dynamic between the girl and Krim, no big deal. It still flowed. It didn't get in the way.
70 pages, though. It's quite a long story. So
Mhm.
you had plenty of story. Phil had plenty of story to tell. You had plenty of story to absorb. What do you think, Aldous? Did he do an adequate job? Or did you feel like there was a lot of filler? Did he fill
No,
those
it's a-
70 pages?
He filled the 70 pages with what I feel is a solid story. There's moments where I have issues with the story, but I feel overall from front to back he delivered good value for what he's charging to his readers for what they got. I think there's always opportunities where you can look at a story, and I know Twitless will agree with this, and improve it. In this case, I think there's definitely there, but for the third installment, this is definitely better than the previous two in conception and as a whole piece. So he's improving from issue to issue, which is one of the key things I like to see. I didn't feel at any point that he's phoning it in or that he's gotten bored.
Right.
He's still trying to ramp it up. You see improvements in layouts, in storytelling, in how he's constructed the plot. It's each time I'm seeing improvements. Would I like those improvements to be a little bit more? Absolutely. But as all, we're still on the rise. I have yet to see any main Lost Pages book where I went, man, that's a step back.
Yeah, and there was no filler in this. It was packed from beginning to end.
I don't know if I'd say there's filler. I would say that I found myself in an interesting spot with this one because I usually put my review into strengths and weaknesses, kind of like pro and con column. And for this comic, things would be simultaneously pro and con at the same time. So, like, for example, I simultaneously liked and also had problems with the frame tale setup here. I liked the sort of frame tale of having kind of an action piece that kind of does some world building, has characters, moves two characters along in a certain story, and then kind of sets up in an almost an anthology way. This is the lead up to the main event for this issue, which is of course the Krim story. On the other hand, I also had a problem with it because the kind of cold open we had with two other characters was a Silhouette and Matt Black. The story had just gotten good, and I went, oh, "Okay, I'm good. I can settle in for this. Let's watch these two characters, do stuff." And then something was like, "Nah, actually, we're not here for that. We're actually going to just go and tell a Krim story instead." And I don't know, like that just. I simultaneously kind of liked the fact that we're using frame tales to set up stories. That's kind of nice. But on the other hand, I was like, I just gotten hooked into this really cool ghost character and a kind of a witchblade type character. And I was like, oh, cool, this is fun. Let's read. Oh no, actually, we're doing something else. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
It was a little abrupt for me, but again, I just when I'm reading a comic book, graphic novel, doesn't matter what, I just go with what they give me, and then I wait till the end to decide how it impacted me. So after finishing the whole thing, yeah, it's not that big a deal. I kind of liked it, and they did kind of bracket it, so it was okay.
So, can you
Right.
give us a little synopsis, Twitless, just because we're diving into the details here, and I would like to at least set the framing for what is Lost Pages and what is Crimstone, and how are these stories told from what perspective?
So that, like I said, it starts off with a cold open with two other characters from Diaz's, I think, kind of broader universe. And I would just to kind of I think I'll just tweak tweak my summary here, but I would say that this is very much in the vein of Image. I would say, so it just feels kind of with this grit and the kind of edge to it, and we're introduced to a character who's who's kind of similar to Witchblade, not entirely, but a little similar to Witchblade, and she's kind of chasing down a very a kind of intangible, ghostly character, and they have kind of a head-to-head kind of a battle, and then in the aftermath of that, the Witchblade character kind of overhears a hobo having a conversation, telling a story essentially, and that hobo pulls out the book with the lost pages kind of in it, and then here's the actual story, and then we actually dive into what we've been seeing on the covers there, the Crimstone story, and
Right.
the Crimstone story. For people who are not familiar, which I wasn't, this is kind of my first Lost Pages experience. Crimstone is a superhero who exists in the mind of a troubled young woman. And so he's basically, Crimstone is this very wild and powerful imaginary friend who's also kind of the result of, the trauma that young woman went through. And so although she feels that she is weak, she can be strong through him, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the manifestation of all of her weaknesses. She was a child that was isolated and subject to bullying, and her response was to manifest a character in her head that is no different than the Max. And if there's any criticism of this, is that the differential between how the Max is generated in that series versus how Crim is generated is very similar.
Well, is it because like
Subjective trauma.
Right, but I feel like the Max does it better in the sense that the Max is from it's like sexual it's like serious, like you would have this woman is broken beyond repair, and in this one it's like she was teased at the schoolyard, and I was like, you got to give me more than that.
No, and I think that's the general flaw. But I think, and I've had this critique on all the Lost Pages, all of the characters, their backstories, with the exception of one, and we'll get to that a little bit later, they're a little thin, and but it works. I mean, when you
Sure.
get into the story, you really don't care. Now, is that a strength? Is it a weakness? More could have been done for sure, but as the context of the story goes, once you buy into the fact that Crim is a part of her and it's her imaginary friend, and there's manifestation there, it really doesn't matter. It's you're in there. So
That's
I don't
what
think it's too important, because at the end of the day, it's a comic. So, and I think it's just meant to be fun. Now, you did say one thing that I do want to correct a little bit, and that you felt the prologue had no bearing on the rest of the story. I disagree. I think whether he executes it well or not is certainly up for discussion. But you've got a legend of Chicago, the Ghost, and number one, I mean, you've got this beautiful page that's a great ode. They're in a room that the lady has, the Witchblade analog has crawled up into this room, and they start fighting with this ghost character, and the papers are flying around the room, and it's a excellent nod to Will Eisner's The Spirit, where one of the papers that's flying around the room has the Lost Pages heading on it. And I appreciated that, because it's nice to see that Phil knows what he's homaging back to the Spirit. He's doing some shadow stuff here. He knows what his callback is, and he's respecting it, and I like to see that. But what he's doing in this page is this girl is looking for a tutor or somebody to teach her. She wants somebody to partner with, and she's looking for guidance. And the last line of the character is, you already know what you're doing. Well, that leads into the story. This is a metaphor opening for the prologue that's going to tell you where the story's going, and that the girl she's strong on her own. She doesn't really need Krim. That's kind of how I took it.
I mean, I get the thematic angle. I'm just saying from a storytelling, it's a comic angle. I was like, oh wow, I'm enjoying these characters, but then like it's been set up for me to follow Matt Black essentially, if not her relationship with the Silhouette, and then that is not what this story is about. The story is Crimstone, and it's such an abrupt cut after selling me, because like I said, I was sold. Because again, when you bring up that homage, it's like, okay, we got some flashy pages. I'm enjoying the action. I'm getting backstory. There's an entire 9-panel grid of Matt Black's backstory.
Yes. No.
I mean, like this is good
on
stuff.
page 9. Well, Red, can you pull up some pages?
Yeah.
About that.
Sure. Let's get a take from Doc between the two of you. So Doc, be the tiebreaker. Who's leaning more in your towards your perspective here?
The jump in the story between the two stories did not pull me out of it. I did find that opening story between Matt Black and the Silhouette was really good, and I would, like Twitla said, I was really getting invested. And then it ends, but it's not that abrupt. And like you said, there is the lead in. She goes into the alley, and there's the guy, and that kind of sets up the next story. And I recognized it for what it was. I wanted to know more, but I was willing to say, okay, we'll find out more later.
Right.
Okay.
Now this is the page that Twitless just referenced, and anybody that listens, whether you tune into the Gutter every week, which is on Fridays at 11:30, I am not a big Image guy. I talk shit about the Image revolution all the time. But one of the things that I really like what Phil did, and this is where you can tell that Phil's a true comic fan, is he likes that Image style, but he likes good story. So he's trying to blend that Image style with good story. But when he does a throwback like this, he goes to a 9-panel grid. And it's awesome because he's doing a past shot. So he's going back to something that's the 9-panel grid throwback. He's doing an homage to it as a background. So it's a recognize of, yes, I know you can do it this way. And out of respect, I'm going to show you the past was this way. And so when he's showing the character's background, he goes to the grid pattern and it's really well done. My critique is there's a couple of moments later in this book where he could have done the same thing and he doesn't. But this is executed very well. I loved this page.
One strength I've noticed with Diaz, and I remember him saying that he works with the artist on the layouts. It's kind of like they go back and forth on it. And so Phil definitely has a mind for doing layouts. He's not just relying on the artist. And that does speak to his strength as a visual storyteller, and the fact that he's cognizant of that and he's working with that with his artist. That's a really good way to approach comics, as opposed to just saying, they fight, do an action scene on the page like a movie. You're using language of comics, and that's yep. Always something I'm gonna like.
Yeah, I got a strong Image vibe off of the visuals, but the storytelling was as solid as the stuff from the 70s and the early 80s. And that's what happens when you can marry kind of that Image hyper visuals with good strong storytelling.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a bit of a split there of the value of the Image influence on Phil. Well, I mean, so did he manage to keep the tone at least consistent? Because it sounds like in some ways he executed those influences well, and in some ways it was lacking. But overall, did it feel like a cohesive read, or did it also shift tonally throughout the book?
There's a tonal shift between that intro, because at the end of the intro, you get the handoff to the hobo, and the hobo is the storyteller of the series. I probably would have liked a little bit more. I mean, you get one panel where he's like, "Oh, I'll tell you a story about the monster from the mind," and then immediately it goes in. It would have been nice if there was a little bit more of a lead in there, maybe an extra panel are
You wanted to pull a full. You wanted a Crypt Keeper, and now for today's story,
Well,
the monster.
okay, and
of the
no, and
maze.
it's important. It's important to talk about that because just as much as we've talked about that, Phil understands comics and he's doing this. That beautiful 9-panel grid is an homage to the past. He really loves the Silver Age, but he's a fan of comic history, and that's part of what his hobo character is. Is in every Lost pages, he's the storyteller. He's telling these stories. And he is. He's the Crypt Keeper. He's the witch. He's the vault keeper. I need a little bit more of that intro that I've had in the past in the books. And I think this one just kind of rushed into the story a little bit. It would have been a little bit better. Maybe even if you cut down that page, because there's like 2 panels that I could have gone without where she's given him change, which, yes, shows that she's a good person. But you could have maybe cut those down and given me one more panel where he turns to his buddy and kind of settles in and starts telling the story. And that's your lead in to Krim. It still works the way it is. It's just I would have liked a little bit more of that EC throwback that he's done in the past a little bit better. I think he's rushing a little bit here. It still works. I'd like to see a little bit more. One of the things, my critique does start on this page, though. If you go to page 13, this is something that I've criticized a lot of books for, and I don't know if it's a modern semblance or not, but there's just so much white space. Like that top panel of her crawling up the wall, you could have carried that brick motif across that entire page and it would have worked. There's no reason for that much white space, in my opinion. I don't like to see white on a page, even if you just go with a muted color. I think it works better, especially if you're going to do layered inset panels like you see on panels 2, 3, and 4 there. Even panel 5 over the top of panel 6, you could have extended panel 6 across and then done the inset.
I don't know. I think I actually kind of enjoyed the white space a bit because one of my critiques of the art. I'll tell you why. No, I'm not just disagreeing to disagree.
No, that makes sense. You're also probably a communist, but
yeah, exactly. That's got to be it. One thing
established.
One thing I had with the art, and I was trying to I was trying to figure out exactly why it was, but there were times where I felt like the artwork was visual stimulus overload on the page. And that's kind of where we lean, I think, too heavy into what some of the sins of the image revolution. Every page is over-rendered, and in my eyes they tire out, and the white space allows you to kind of like give some breathing room, and that's why I'm I don't know.
I'll agree with you on that much later into this book, where there's a couple of pages where it's just a little too much going on. But right here, I didn't feel that. I feel it's good progression. I just think you could have muted that page a little bit and made it a little bit what I would consider more attractive. The white space to me, it just comes across as void and doesn't invest you in the page. It doesn't keep you in the story. It's taking you out of the story. That's just me, though.
Doc, what do you think? You're the artist on the panel. How do you look at this page composition?
I see the use of that negative space as a tonal break. You know, we're coming out of this incredibly dark encounter between these two. They both realize that neither means the other harm. And now we have a tonal shift. Now we have a lot of light breaking through. So we had a lot of darkness. Now we're in the light. And
it's a metaphor.
Well, it's a tonal shift. Both in the
tonal shift, not metaphor, Twitless.
Oh, okay.
It's not a metaphor.
Is it abrupt though, or do you feel like it transitioned smoothly enough? It's not jarring for the reader to all of a sudden go from a totally black page like this to one that feels.
I would have probably done one more panel on that previous page to show her going out a window or whatever, and then we're down the drain pipe. But you know, it works. I was like, I didn't get lost. You know.
Well, then it jumps to this page, which is kind of like, you know, a nice little splash page.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What is your take though of this layout? As a artist yourself, comic creator.
It's a fantastic layout. Good stuff. And again, you know, the over the top image style is fully voiced right here, but it's good. It's well done.
Yeah, from this point forward, they're not pulling any punches for what they're going to be presenting to you. It's very up in your face, and again, it comes across. He's a fan of that 90s image style, and it's going to come across The one thing I will credit Phil for is he does a good job of presenting the story, which Image certainly never did in their early years.
Correct.
Up until like phase 2, phase 3 of their books. But man, that you can tell it's there, and he understands it, and he's going. I think, at least reading it, going through it the second time, it really felt like he's really trying to keep the pacing in balance with the art, so that over the top art is balanced with the over the top storytelling.
Yeah,
And you get those huge rises and those nice baselines.
The only visual critique or complaint I had on the cover here, or the splash, was I'm being introduced to Crimstone right here, right now, and I could not tell if it was Grimstone or Crimstone because the C looks like a G.
Right. So this is where I started to have some issues with just the general either I think it's a combination of the art and I think mostly it's the coloring that's causing a chunk of the issues, but this is where this is where my eyes started to hurt, and I went, ooh, my eyes are going to be suffering a bit as I read this, and that happened a bit as I read it.
It's a little like watching a Poison video from the late 80s.
Your eyes are going to take
every
a little bit
rose
of a beating.
has its thorn.
You're
so
right.
Just don't grip the book too tight, and you'll be fine. Don't focus your eyes too much. But yeah, as you go through,
you need to wear sunglasses to read this comic.
Yeah.
Yes, only at night though.
Okay.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But yeah, we get this great, again, we're doing the past, so we get that nice panel grid, the 3x3. We understand progression. Everything going on here shows you that Phil's talking to his artist, like Well Red mentioned. He's doing it well. He's setting everything up. He's giving you the backstory. I like how this panel presents the past. Like we've already suggested that the past is going to show you everything in grid form, and then we move into the story. It's just a nice background. To complement what Twitless is saying, and I can't believe I'm saying this, to go from introductory splash to grid to splash is a little jarring. I feel that transition into the story could have been done a little bit better.
That was my question too, because just scrolling through the PDF here, I can see it feels like it's pages that don't really go together, all kind of meshed together, and I'm just wondering how that experience was as a read.
So it's okay. So I'll so the way it read to me is I went, wow, there's clearly a creator who has a toolbox of interesting page designs and approaches, but not necessarily putting them together with entirely with a structural vision, but like, oh, this would be cool, or this is a cool thing, and there's a little bit of like, okay, flashbacks are themed a little bit, or this is exciting, so it's gonna be a little more bombastic. So it's I guess I'd say it's definitely a ride, a roller coaster ride, and it definitely has a very it's got a set destination, so you end up in a fun place, but there's some bumps. So to answer your question, there were some bumps.
When I was first scrolling through, as we are right now, with no preconceptions, because I didn't read the previous lost pages, I thought, oh, we're looking at unused material from another book, and these are the covers and splash pages. And it wasn't until the actual story starts that I realized, oh no, that's not what we were looking at. So like what you said, Well Read, as I was scrolling through there, I thought, oh, that's a great cover. That's a nice splash page. Oh, is that what this is? And then the story starts, and I was able to get right back into it. So it did pull me out a little bit, but at the same time, I can appreciate it for what I was looking at.
So I guess let's jump into the story, since it's been alluded to many times, and it feels like that part is fairly engrossing. Phil sounds like he writes characters very well, gives them a lot of depth. Can you talk a little bit about what you thought of the characterization for the main characters here? Twitless, let's go with you.
I don't know if I'd call it deep, but that doesn't mean bad. I think some people with comic to bring back what Aldous says. Can't believe I agree with Aldous. No,
you're prickly. You're prickly tonight, Twitless.
I know, a little bit. it's a comic. It's meant to be, you know, an entertaining ride. And so I think some people who were unduly influenced by people like Alan Moore and company felt like every single superhero needed to have a full novel's worth of childhood traumas to work out on the page in therapy. And it was like, no, the comic started off just being like adventures, action. Literally, they would name comics after just like the, you know, the verb or, you know, adjective they wanted you to think of. And so this Phil Diaz is bringing a very straightforward story with, I would argue, not extremely, at this stage at least, not extremely complicated characters. Although he's channeling the Max, we do not have the Max's level of like mind screwery and like, and then you open the lid and it's like, oh gosh, there's a whole bunch of incest and rape in here, and you know, trauma being kind of, you know, put in layers and, you know, symbolism and all that. It's like, no, this is a fun ride. I'm influenced by some of these aesthetics. It's a very straightforward character arc. There is a character arc, and that's where I think that Phil Diaz is shining a little bit more than some image comics that were just nothing but flash and no substance. You definitely have a beginning, a middle, and end, and a character arc. You can see all of those signposted fairly well, and that ride hits all of those appropriate landmarks. The characters are pretty, like I said, pretty straightforward. The story is pretty straightforward, but these are positives. These are not negatives. And so to just give a little hint of the arc, we have our character who is like I said, a very troubled young woman, and her community ends up getting kind of menaced by forces that are kidnapping children. And so she kind of gets swept up in that kind of plot and finding out who's at the bottom of that. And then in the meantime, finding out how it all connects back to her. And then discovering through that her own inner strength. That's the kind of basic gist of what we've got. So
this panel is exactly where for a split second I got lost. So the guy says the bitch is climbing on us. The bitch, there's a big old monster on here. So I scroll back up. Is the big monster a girl? So I scroll back up to look. Uh-oh. It went away.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm trying to adjust it quickly.
And you know, I had to clarify, okay, no. So that's when I ask, okay, well, what are they seeing that I'm not seeing? The character on the page, the bitch is climbing on us. And I look, and the big old monster has his fingertips sunk into the metal of the van. And I thought, well, okay, it's really there. So is this like a shroud creature around her, a golem? Can they not see the monster? And she's just on top of the van. That's where a little bit of the confusion early on set in for me, but it went away quickly.
So if we're going to talk about that, that's actually one of my biggest storytelling problems with this character and how the character is implemented in the story. Because the concept here that we're being sold on is that we have a relatively normal young woman. She's very athletic and she's a good fighter. She's a scrappy fighter, but she has no superhuman abilities. Her superpower is this projection of her imaginary friend. And from the and they actually, Phil Diaz, and I do like that he did this. He kind of at the very end kind of has bios and power
Right.
power cards. And what we're told there is that the way the power generally works is that no one can see the imaginary friend except for kids. So all human beings without superpowers see is just her, and that he is giving her superhuman strength and durability, and I think a healing factor essentially. And so she basically she's looking kind of normal, but to the normal bystander, she would look like a normal athletic woman, but then she would be, you know, gripping into the car. The problem is that the writing and the art seem to imply that Crimstone is in fact either visible, or B, that he is in fact manifesting himself in the story.
Yeah.
There's a panel later on that there's a panel later on that really shows this, because she's holding a guy she's trying to help. Meanwhile, Crimstone is holding up a building, and I'm like, these two things they don't jive with each other with how this character is being sold to me. That's where I got really lost, and it does undermine a bit. It's the execution. Like I said, it's a very interesting character. I like it. I'm on board with it. The execution has some holes. And when you do have a character like this, if you give a character just regular super strength or X-ray vision or the rest, it's easier. When you have a character who's kind of a little more experimental, a little more psychological, a little more intangible, like you have to put more effort into your script in terms of how that character is interacting with the world, or you're going to run into these problems.
Right.
Aldous, would you like to elucidate for us all the ways that Twitless is incorrect?
No, he's actually not incorrect. This is one of my critiques of it, and going through it, it was a little confusing because I read a little bit of the character before, and if you go back to page 20, you see Krim in the rearview mirror as she's looking in. She's following the van. She looks in the rearview mirror. She sees Krim, which makes sense. You see panel 2, it's her. You see panel 3, it's her. You see panel 4, it's her. You turn the page, and then you get Krim. And I'm like, oh, so they can see him now. Okay. But then we lose that consistency because at the bottom of page 22, it's her on top of the car. And it shouldn't be. At this point, she should be in full. The presentation of the character should be Krim as far as how it's been presented up to this point. And so we get a bifurcation of how we're presenting the character. And so I'm with Doc, I'm with Twitless. It's a little confusing of what's going on. And you're taken not out of the story, but you're going like, wait, what did I miss? And it causes you to flip back.
Exactly.
Can you pull up page 32? 32 was the one that really confused me.
Oh, we're going to jump all up there.
So here, just for the visual of it, if you want to scroll to the bottom of that page. So we have a moment here where, here we go, right here. So she has her hands on someone else, and the way the powers work, but he's holding up the building. So it's almost implying that she's in two places at the same time, or he's manifesting in the real world. If he's manifesting in the real world, which I thought was the culmination of the arc in this very issue, I got really just confused here.
Yeah, this is where
I started. The way you fix this is real simple. Is in panel. Go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I was beginning to think to myself, okay, she's projecting this creature from her id. So he's now been brought fully into the world. That's what I thought was happening here.
I thought she's Kamala Harris and this is Willie Brown. So I'm really confused. Sorry. I mean,
and now we're relevant, Shem.
Hey, there it is. There it is.
I'm looking at the page right now, and I see no point where she's on her knees, so that couldn't possibly be the case.
Oh, you're right. My mistake.
When you look at panel, and I'm with Twitless on this, panel 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this page this issue can be resolved if at no point she makes contact with the person, if she's just standing there, because then it's still, where is she? What's actually going on? He's only responding to her, and she can be talking and holding everything up. It's the minute she touches him that now you have physical contact that breaks the moment. Now, unless I'm missing something, but I'm with Twitless on that. This was a problem for me as well. And the thing I liked about this was, again, and I thought this is where he was headed initially when I turned the page and I see panel 1. I thought it was going back to the standard an older style layered grid, right? Because you've got, we talk about beats, and this is a 9-panel grid with just 3 long beats and then 2 short beats. And I'm like, oh man, like I get it what he's doing, but then I see she's making contact, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense. How can she be in 2 places at once? So I'm with Twitless on that. That's a valid critique. I'd love to hear what Phil has to say on that.
So to me, I think that, because when I've worked with scripts with superhero characters, it's the more unique your superhero character is, and the more interesting that character's power sets are, the more you have to either spend more time in the scripting, revision, or editing phase to catch those potential issues. And so I really respect people who come up with very interesting power sets and how they interact with the world. It allows you to really dive into some really interesting story opportunities, but you also have to spend quite a bit of time to, theory craft and make sure that you're not, running into some of these potential issues, or else, like I said, readers get confused and they go, okay, what's going on here? What powers are we manifesting here? Yeah.
Right. Well, and to bring it home, if you look at
the same every time it's manifesting, those things are signature to how a character presents itself. And real quick, I'll just before you take off here, the elephant in the room is the font for Krim is really hard to read.
Yes. No, I love the style of the balloon and with the
Mm-hmm.
color that's associated with the purple and it draws in.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm with you,
Mm-hmm.
man. It is. And I think one of the greatest sins that you can make is don't make it a struggle to read.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do, you're taking away comics are three things, right? It's page layout, it's the actual panel, and then it's the lettering. And when you take away one of those and you make it difficult, and it is difficult, not so much, some pages are better than others, but it's just, it needs, I like the offset lettering. I like it that it's broken, but man, just crisp those edges up and make it a little bit easier to read. But I think to go back to what Twitless was saying, page 33, that last panel, they do all the work for you in telling you all the confusion is settled because they say us, I mean me and Warwick. So he can't see Krim. So again, it goes back to that physical contact thing. She can't be in two places at once. And that's it's so simple of a solution to just make it so that she doesn't touch him. Just pull it back and she's talking to him and say, "Oh, get out," while she's, in
I would
between the two positions. So, but you
I w-
still show Krim holding it up.
Yeah, I would argue that for me visually, and again, maybe and this might be just be me, but I feel like in order to really work this idea, most of the panels, or if not all, when you're doing this kind of thing, she needs to be basically in a similar or basically the same pose that he is in to kind of tell me,
Yeah.
oh, it's him on top of her. Another
Exactly.
thing, and they did this once. Another thing that I think also helps sell the idea visually, not in writing at all, is to adjust his transparency. Because there was one panel where they actually made him kind of translucent. It was like, oh, he's kind of a mind creature. Because the more solid you make him, the more that my brain just tells me he's in the same space. If you just add a little bit of a transparency effect, I go, oh, he's like ethereal or psionic or something. I know it's a minor detail, but in my opinion, it's very helpful to establish
No,
that
that's a good point.
he's not, because he's not supposed to be here until the very, and this actually ties into the culmination of the issue, because the culmination of the issue is for not just for Jasmine here, Jazzy, our troubled woman, but for the actual imaginary friend, he gets a moment where he gets to experience the real world. And so showing him in full transparency there would be so much more impactful if he was a little bit, just dial down that transparency, just like 10%, just a little bit. And it's like, oh, he's not entirely there. And then when he fully is there, it would be like, oh, wow, he's really manifesting. The way it is right now, it's only because we're being told he's not there that our mind even potentially registers that he's not.
Very interesting. There's you guys
Now,
have quite a lot to say.
Well,
about
this
how
is the
that
central. This is
character
the
is represented.
central. It's the main character and her power set and how she interacts with the world in the book. I know we're getting hung up on this detail, but this detail is the crux of the plot. Like it's not just oh, it's incidental. Like everything around this issue, including the villain's plot, is to access her
Yes.
powers. Like the villain's point, the reason why he's kidnapping kids, he wants to emulate her abilities. He wants what she has. Our cool villain you got on the page here is an experiment to create what she is. Everything centers around that. So it's actually it's not, we're not just getting bogged down in a detail. This is what the story is about.
Well, it even comes up on it even comes up on page 38 when Wastoid shows up, and Jazz even says, like, Wastoid can see Krim, and everyone can see Wastoid. So we've established that's shocking. And so it goes back to that point of, well, there's a little bit of confusion. Now, I will say after this point, I didn't have any confusion. It's very clear what's going on and everything's progressing. It's just those initial moments are a little jarring. And Doc put it best, because you read it and you go, wait, what? And you kind of go back and look and go, okay. And you keep on going, but it's just a question mark. And then by the time you hit this point in the story, it really doesn't matter because you're just invested in the story. And that's the, I would quote, the image influence of how the story progresses. You kind of, it flows really well and it keeps you entertained. But if you step back, there's questions early on. But from this point on, that doesn't happen. The rest of this, I feel, is pretty well crafted.
So to kind of put an end cap on my thoughts on it, this did not ruin the story for me. The story as a whole, the roller coaster ride still worked,
Yeah, absolutely.
But because it does bear for critique and for the further refinement of these issues going forward, it does bear a little bit of a sidetrack there. So,
all right. Well, what about the arc overall? Did you feel like he found an appropriate resolution? He told the complete story.
Yes.
Putting this exposition detail aside of how he was representing the character, how did you feel his overall objective was met in telling his narrative?
Yeah, he stuck the landing. Period.
Stuck the landing?
Yeah. I'm not going to spoil the end for anybody that's not read it, but he sticks the landing. It was really well done. It's a satisfying story.
Phil's a good storyteller, and while I feel what I would consider Act 1 had maybe 2 small road bumps that we have already discussed and maybe spent an inordinate amount of time on, but they're 2 relatively small road bumps that introduce you to an Act 2 and an Act 3 that are very well executed and keep you engaged. And like Twitlis said, it's a roller coaster. And maybe it's just that moment where you're going up the hill and you hear the chain chinking with each gear turn, and you're a little bit more cognizant of all the things around you, like because you're going up and what you're leading into. You're leading into action because it's a Phil Diaz story, and so it does have that 90s influence. And so I know that eventually I'm going to turn the page and it's just going to be balls to the wall, well executed stuff. But there's a couple of moments where you're sitting in the coaster and you're looking out and you're seeing the trees, and then all of a sudden, boom, you hit that hill and it's action on. That's kind of what it is. It's not terrible, it's not major, but it's there and it's worth talking about. Now from here on out, and earlier I had mentioned that there are a couple of pages that I feel are way too busy. Page 46 is the one that I do agree with Twitless. It's a little bit much. And I think what it is, it's just there's so much crim that it's just so much purple that it was kind of jarring. This is like where gutter lines would have helped with now I love the rotation. We're doing 2/3. We're playing with 2/3 and we're doing angle panels, and that's great. But a little bit of separation would have helped there of any kind, just to delineate, because the colors kind of get a little muddied, not terribly, just a little. As Snuggie says, it's not 6 pages of black, so it's obviously a huge miss. But
it's great drink.
Yeah, the next page, 47, was awesome. I like coming from this. It was like, and then 47 recovered because they got that great 3-panel inset of Jazz, and then we get the awesome contrast of Wastoid on the side. And Wastoid, as much as I like the design and the application of Krim in this, Wastoid is fantastic. He is like pure. You want to talk about 90s influence, man. This is over the top, and it's a little bit of Carnage, it's a little bit of Violator, it's a little bit of Venom. It's everything all wrapped into one with a great contrasting color to Krim being that purple, and that purple's been a theme throughout this whole story. And then we get this beautiful, like, radioactive lime green.
He's a booger monster. Yeah.
Which is fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah. Which is not a criticism at all. In fact, I want to praise something about this, something that we see in modern comics that this comic does way better. Modern comics have lost the art of the art of the fight scene, because we've seen a lot of superhero characters fight, I think, so often that modern writers will just go, oh, it's time for the superhero to fight. And then you see these fights and they're wet farts all the time. It's like, oh, they'll ramp up to this epic showdown, and then within 2 pages, the fight's over. And and if you're a fan of, you know, not just the 90s, but of fun fight scenes, Crimstone has, is it 2 to 3 almost fights with Booger Monster here and
Wasteoid, yeah.
Wasteoid, and then like the one the final fight, like it hit a point where I thought it was going to have the cheap sort of sucker punch ending, and then no, it was like, no, that's just round one, and then like it was like, no, he gets back up for a second win, and I was like, okay, this is reminding me of some older comics where the brawls were more like, you know,
It
12
does have
rounds
a
in the ring.
Yeah, it does have more of a Copper Age feel to the fights. And again, this is something I feel comes across in all of Phil's stuff. And sometimes the execution is there, and sometimes it's like 80% or 60% there. But you can tell he's a fan of comics and has read comics, because you don't get those cheap outs that you see in a lot of modern books. And when I say modern, I'm saying, 2005 on, where you'll see the rushed
Contemporary.
fight at the end, just to end the book that we've spent all this time setting it up, and we're going to spend 4 pages on the fight, and that's it all. That's all you get. And then the other thing that you see that Phil does is he really has a great grasp of how action happens in the gutter line. And what you're getting in the panel is the reaction. And that's a Silver Age thing. And Doc can talk about that, but you're going to get the reaction. The action happens in the gutter, and then you're seeing the reaction. And a lot of times you'll play with the camera angle, and Phil does a really good job of turning the camera angle appropriately when he wants to present who's kind of on top currently in the fight, who's winning. And it's really enjoyable. I thought it was a really nice blend of the two styles, of that ode to the 90s, but at the same time the respect going back to the silver and the copper and the bronze age of how we're going to handle a fight and how we're going to handle that progression.
There was actually, I know this is a minor point, there's a nice back and forth so often in again contemporary comics. It's like, you just know, oh, it's time for the good guy to win, and then you just, the rest of it's just kind of it's a moot point. But this one actually, like I said, there's back and forth, like, you know, there's a seesaw, you know, of these characters going back and forth, and just when you think one of them is out, they actually pull something back, you know, pull them back in. And these are very praiseworthy things to talk about, because they've just been, they're lost arts in a lot of.
No, they are, truly. I agree with you fully on that, man.
Is this something very common from your experience in Silver Age books, Doc, or did you find this a more modern, jarring form of storytelling?
No, the storytelling, the layout, the fight, all of it was really strong, well executed, easy to follow. The only 90s influence is just the line work and the coloring.
Yep.
I did have a moment where I thought, are we looking at creepsters? Are these the
You know what? Go to page 66. That's the
Yeah.
one where I
Yeah.
swear to God, it's a Max book. It's just a little too close to home, because this feels like a Max book. It feels like Sam Keith.
Yeah, this is some Sam Keith for sure right here.
You killed my hostage.
Yeah, and that's the only page that I was like, okay, they're hitting a little too close to what they're really drilling at. Otherwise, but man, and this is a great page. It doesn't take anything away, other than it's just like, I've read the Max, and the only thing when I turned the page to this was like, wow, that's the Max. It felt like the Max, and that's both a compliment and a critique.
Yeah, one of the things that helped me with this was I actually did a comic in the 90s. It wasn't my property. I was just a penciler. And it was the hero fought in the collective unconscious, could travel there at will. And so would confront nightmare creatures and people's darkest sides and blah, 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 all these manifestations of psychosis. And so this kind of trippy stuff, no problem. I mean, I just flowed with it. It was cool.
So you say you did that when you were young?
Yes, when I was young.
Okay.
Oh, that's brutal.
Bigfoot Loch Ness asks, I feel like not enough credit is going to the artist for the camera angles.
Absolutely strong visual storytelling.
Can you give us a few thoughts on the art in the book? What's your critique of this artist, Doc?
Oh, he's very talented, very on point. He is conveying, I feel as if he's conveying exactly what the writer wanted from him. I don't get, you've read stories where the story and the art just doesn't match. This gels perfectly.
No, this
And
this
yes,
is a
damn you,
writer and artist
KSS.
that are working hand in hand and are communicating for sure.
Yes,
You can
I
tell.
was young once. I don't know their dynamic, but I do get the sense that yeah, I'm sure Phil's giving the penciler here, free reign. You do these camera angles in the best way you think, whatever, because there's not that awkwardness to it. It all kind of flows pretty fluidly from page to page.
No, and Dale A is right, man. This is the best looking Lost Pages book yet, and that's the credit to. I think that's the credit to Phil. Is he's an amateur, man. He's coming into his own. He's only what 5-6 books in. He's still learning the trade, and this is the best executed yet. And Linkovich asks, "Is there anything original in it?" Everything's an homage. Everything. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing now. You're going to draw comparisons to what was before, especially if you have people like Phil that are a comic fan. It's how you blend those homages together and move them forward. And yeah, there's a lot of original panels. There's a lot of original storytelling here. I think the concept is great with Wastoid coming in and he's the antithesis of Crimstone and that he can actually be seen. That's a really cool concept that he's playing with where Krim's at a different level than this villain and they've got to deal with that and then Krim gets isolated from Jazz. That's something that's really neat and he plays with it really well.
That was a great concept to break the two of them apart and each of them have to do their own struggle. I found that to be incredibly well done, great idea. It was well executed, no complaints whatsoever.
No, exceptionally well executed. And I'll have a lot of comments on the the 90s homage, but again, man, one of the things I keep coming back to is it is very evident that Phil is responsible as a storyteller. And while Act 1 had those few hiccups, man, Act 2, like I said, Act 2 and Act 3, it hums.
Bro,
And it
this
does a
word
really
balloon.
good job of keeping Go ahead, Ben.
I was just gonna say, the word balloon. Look at it. Pronounce that. Go ahead. That fucking rocks.
Yes.
When what comes out of your mouth is so fucking metal that it can't even be translated into words.
It's a great splash page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
I will say, like, the artwork I think is very solid, and not just in terms of action, but again layout, which is something again a lost art in comics in many cases. I think one critique I could make is I think sometimes the anatomy. I think there's still some further development that the artist can make regarding keeping anatomy really consistent. Jazz's body proportions. I know some of this is due to her having her superpowers and kind of how they work, but there are other moments where it feels like her body proportions aren't entirely.
Don't you dare
consistent.
criticize her rack size. There is no reason for that.
That booty could stand a little criticism, though.
Can you zoom in on the panel inset in the top left here?
Sure.
Because what we've got here is Jazz morphed into Krim.
Yep.
And that was confusing for me for a moment there. And what I was wondering is, okay, is this what she's looking like in the physical world now that, Krim is basically powered up?
I think this is the moment where he's crossing into the real world, and I think he's basically he's like
on her frame.
Yeah. I think she's like morphing into him essentially, or she's like he's on top of her essentially.
Well, that's what I was asking myself as I was seeing this, and I thought it was it was, how do I say this? Was this what I was supposed to be seeing all along? You know what I'm saying? Back when we're on top of the van, is this what we were seeing, or what the bad guys were supposed to see? Just a thought that crossed my mind.
Right. See, I took it at this point that Krim has kind of passed over into the concept of the same way that Wastoid is now that everybody can see him. So you're starting to see him break through that wall. And that's why it's not just Jazz, is you're starting to see pieces of Krim projected on Jazz in the real world, because he's broken past that same wall that Waistoid has already broken past, and he's now corporeal.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. The final power up, he's manifesting into the real world.
All right.
Ouch.
Let's get to final thoughts, because we still have an interview coming up with Phil to ask him all these questions.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have any other points that you wanted to hit before we wrap things up?
I'll go first because I'll be the shortest. I know. I listen to these two guys.
All right.
2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Well worth the investment. You'll enjoy the read. You'll enjoy the art. Period. Full stop.
Mm. Should I have you guys battle it out for who's next? Twitless, you.
Well, I'll tell you this. I
Oh.
love the story. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think it's the best Lost Pages book yet. I think it shows both Phil's growth and his ability, more importantly, to communicate his vision to an artist and have it executed in a great fashion. Is it perfect? By no means. No book is. I mean, even Will Eisner has problems, but this is a massive step above. And I agree with Matt Fowler. This is a 7 to 8 out of 10 easily. My favorite page in this book, though, and it's something we haven't discussed yet, is Krim's a great character and Jazz is a great character. Waistoid is a great villain, but the one character that Phil and his brother have created that is, I think transcends a lot of indie comics, and it's a goddamn travesty that they haven't done more with it, is Masquerade. And page 60 shows a short reveal of Masquerade in this book, and it's my favorite page. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I can't encourage Phil enough to do more with this character. It is fantastic. He needs to go down that road. Krim's great. It's a lot of fun. Masquerade is something that is unlike anything else out there, and it was great to see him make a little brief appearance in this book.
Yeah, Phil needs to get filthy rich so he can have several artists working on several books at once.
Ain't that the truth?
Masquerade is easily my second favorite song from Phantom of the Opera.
Thank you for that.
Good night, everybody.
All right, Twitless. Final thoughts.
It's a fun romp, and I want to point this out. Even if it's your first ride, so this is I think I've read one of the Ashcans. So this is my first Lost Pages, and even picking it up essentially on its third installment, this is still a fun, worthwhile ride, which I think speaks is one of the highest pieces of praise you can give a comic that's on its second or third installment. That you can just jump on and still kind of get invested, and you have enough material that you're not, completely, without a paddle. It's a throwback to fun, straightforward action storytelling. No muss, no fuss. No muss, no fuss, and a lot of bust and butt. This is how I wanted to. That was my little catchphrase for that.
That's very cute.
Anyway, so that being said, not a perfect ride. I'd say that it's generally better than average, especially for what it's being compared to with Image Comics. I've already said enough about the imaginary friends, so I'm not going to really retread that ground. I do think I would want to see in the future, if we're going to have a character like this, where we're dealing with a character who is a projection of someone's mind, I definitely want to see maybe a little more cerebral here and there exploration, especially since there's such fertile ground for it. You don't have to go into trauma dumping, but just, a little more to sink my teeth into would be nice. On the whole, I'm interested in future installments. Again, one of the highest pieces of praise you can give a book like this. So I would recommend it to anyone who likes gritty street level superheroes and Image, especially. So if you're in that cross section, I think you're going to really, really like it.
Well, thank you. So I guess with that, we'll bring on somebody who likes gritty street level superheroes and Image. Please welcome Phil Diaz.
Hello. What's up, everybody?
How are you,
Hey.
Phil?
Good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving the book a read and review, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. It was a pretty thorough discussion. A lot of opinions there. So tons to go over afterwards when you rewatch the stream.
Yes. I was watching.
What do you think when people say like there's a lot of Image influence? How much did Image influence your work as a comic creator?
Well, for the Lost Pages, since it's a, I guess, kaleidoscope of different characters, right? I really wanted the series to touch on as many different styles and genres that I could, that I like, popular styles and influences that make me love comics. And Krim is the 90s style character. He's the over the top bombastic, very much influenced by Lobo, characters like Venom, the Mask. And you guys mentioned the Max a lot, but like his style and kind of humor really wanted to channel that old Dark Horse Mask character. And especially like when he's in the mindscape where he uses as an imagination as his weapon, he could kind of manifest things. So it was, especially this book was meant to be that over the top 90s volume of the Lost Pages.
Are there any particular books in particular, or sorry, I said particular twice. Are there any books that would stand out in terms of the Image catalog that you selected from?
Well, I mean, I guess like on color scheme stuff, and obviously the well, you were calling them like the creepsters. Those were like my like darkness gremlins, or the what are they, the is it the is from the Max, right? Those little guys, the bad guy gremlins from there. So I guess those two specifically for this book and specifically for Krim. But I think Doc, you mentioned was it? Well, you probably mentioned Sam Keith, but a lot of influence was Keith Giffen for the character, because he did a lot of the early 90s Lobo stuff, Trencher, and kind of having that
was the vibe I was
goofiness.
getting. I was getting more Venom and Lobo than I was the others.
But I mean, all this is totally right. And I probably, because I've speaked upon this before, is I want to give 90s comic fans what they love about 90s comics, and then hide the good story in there as well. Like that's something I try to do the hardest.
Smuggle in a good story.
You trick them with the art that they love, so they could swallow that story and then hopefully think about it.
You succeeded.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I want to draw the Liefeld fans in and then hide feet throughout the issue.
Yeah, we put the feet in there for a reason.
Smuggled in a story when you weren't looking.
Did you intentionally avoid like some of the more mature themes? Because I think Twitless was saying the Max would go into incest and rape and things like that, whereas you seem to go into more lighthearted fare.
Just kidnapping, just the lighter crimes.
Well,
microaggressions.
Well, actually, in the first appearance of Crimstone, there's a kind of like, it's a 9-panel grid in the Lost Pages 1 of her growing up and the abuse that she faced during that time. So there's like a panel of her, because she was like an overweight kid. She grew up, had body image issues, and there's like a panel of her on a scale. She's weighing herself. She gets into abusive relationship. There's a panel of her getting slapped in the face, and this is during the whole time where she didn't see Krim anymore. And through that time, he was in her head fighting all those inner demons that we see in the third one. So kind of that part of the story I put in her first appearance. And and in fact, Nate, the bully, is shown in that first appearance too. So yeah, I didn't want to be overly blatant about stuff like that. And I think I could probably even flesh that out more later in the series if we were to go back to some of her origins. But I'm not afraid to do that. Like if you, in the People story, that first one that you guys reviewed, I think like last year, a year and a half ago, I've touched on some some topics like that. But this, I wanted to be very over the top, but still have kind of that trauma in there where she does give up on herself a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
It sounds
during that time is when Krim wasn't manifesting, so to speak.
Right.
He,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you said something very telling. He was always there fighting her inner demons for her, giving her the strength to get through all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely wanted that apparent, especially in that first story. There's a traumatic event that does happen in there, and that's why she starts seeing him again.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what Red's getting at there, and this is not a criticism really, but just kind of a difference in your approach. Perhaps you're definitely not afraid to explore serious or mature topics with these characters, but the way you're going about it is not the same way that some of those during the what they call the dark age of comics, right, where every character needed to not just address these issues but mire themselves in them. Every character had to have not just trauma, but it was trauma that we were going to be graphically subjected to and then just like beat over, misery porn essentially.
Sure.
And so your approach is definitely different than that. You're not putting your characters into misery porn. I find that to be refreshing. I'm happy with that. But that seems to be a deliberate choice you're making. And it's sometimes people think that, there's only two doors, either everything's just to be light, fluffy, and sunshine and daisy, silver age, or it's going to be dark, serious. And there's loads of things you can do in between. And that's sounds like kind of what your approach is. Is that fair to say? Or
I think for the specific story, just because it is so colorful and over the top, and I think on the kidnapping kids part, I tried to have the stakes be pretty high, and kind of the acts that were going on and happening to these people were pretty serious. Especially in like the third act, kind of get to a point where it does go into a darker area. Yeah. I think every story, that's why I love writing this stuff, is because the second book deals with completely different themes than this one, and then the first one as well. And then when we go onto the next stuff, it's not going to look as much as a 90s comic, and it's going to have completely different themes in the series.
Also, is it a consistent theme in Lost Pages that they're homage books to all these other properties, and that's the reason why?
I think that's just. I think that probably just comes across from the characters that I create. So.
Since we're talking about 90s, I had a follow-up kind of question regarding that. So there's, I want to hear your take on the 90s aesthetic, the 90s question, because on the one hand, the image revolution, Aldous, for example, has, said that he's joined by many, a host of, academics and people who are in the industry who specifically cite.
Please, Twitlis, never associate me with academics.
Too bad. You and R.C. Harvey have similar opinions. Too bad. Anyway, so the thing is that there's a whole host of people who specifically point at 90s image and say, this was not only bad for comics, but they'll point to it and say this was like the death of comics. And yet at the same time, it's especially for people in this indie movement, it's often cited as one of the most beloved for many people. There are a lot of people who point and say, I loved, Jim Lee, I loved this particular moment. So how do you go about what are your thoughts on that whole 90s thing and trying to utilize it while also, either trying to thread that needle between utilizing the things that people love while also avoiding the sins that some people say like killed comics?
Right. Well, I recently spoke about this specific topic on like last week's episode of the Creative Block, which is a show that myself, Irene, Narwhal, and Hyper Wizard do on Thursday nights. And I think the topic was like, for lack of a better term, evergreen content, like stuff that stands the test of time, I think was the topic. And specifically bringing up your point where there's so many, especially creators and artists in this space, online crowdfunding books, that champion 90s image as the best thing that's ever happened to comics. But I think the reason that is because that's the thing that got them into comics. Because you look at that, Gen X aged comic reader when you were in your early 20s or teenager, or when that stuff was happening, and that was something that you ran out and bought, and it shot adrenaline into the comic industry, and then it fizzled out. But I think that was very much a flash in the pan, or it's like, oh, here's the best top artist creators. They're being rebels and they're being punks, and they're leaving and creating their own thing. And when the stuff was created, and like Aldous was saying, the stories weren't there. And I think in comic books, story is the marketable thing for longevity. So that's what's going to make companies want to buy it and turn it into movies. And that's going to put it even more into the zeitgeist. And that's what's going to make people remember it even more belovedly.
Right. Well, you stepped on the third rail there, Phil, because it's not about movies. It's not about TV shows. It's about the second issue. Art sells the first issue.
Yeah.
Story sells the second issue. Once you've done that for 30 to 40 issues, then people will go, hey, maybe film adaptation, movie adaptation,
definitely.
show adaptation. But you have to sell the second. And when you're jumping, if you're jumping around and just showing great art, it's never going to happen. You need to have consistent great art.
Yeah.
The X-Men died. And then the X-Men were brought back by Lin Wein, and they were handed over to Chris Claremont, and it became the movement that we know today. The minute it was handed away from Claremont, it died.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have the story anymore. You need to have the essence of story. A good friend of mine described it as the male soap opera. And you need to have that. You need to have action and drama blended at the appropriate mix that men look at it. Not the kind of men that cry when they see Wolverine in his costume in a preview, but the kind of men that actually, they're young men. They're men that just they want good engagement. You need to have that. Lord of the Rings has it. That's why Lord of the Rings has retention. People still read it. That's why, everybody loved Band of Brothers, because you see that there's emotion, but there's also manliness. There's action. You need to have that. That blend is sacred. And if you hit that, then man, you're in a special spot.
I think Phil was agreeing with you on that. I think he was saying that, I think he was talking about the fact that the reason why people do go to certain stories for films is because they have really good stories.
Because they're good stories and they're evergreen. When I bring up movies, it's to be a point of like, oh, this is why we don't have a Youngblood movie or a Wildcats movie, because there weren't any standout stories that were worth making that IP into films, and that's, relating it to modern times.
You have a Bloodshot film, so,
Yeah, I was going to say, there's some counterpoints to that.
I didn't mind that Bloodshot film.
Yeah, there are poor adaptations of good stories too, but they only attempt to adapt them because the story stood out to begin with.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. But
in your Act 3, I said it while we were doing the review. You nailed the landing. In that, the visual storytelling was fantastic, but the story itself just fully developed. Here it is. It had a great climax and ending. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I guess my thesis on this review would be what I said a moment ago. You smuggled in a great story behind some fantastic art.
Thank you. And when you guys were talking about the fight scenes and specifically the ending, like, I was very conscious of wanting the fight scenes and kind of like the choreography to matter in the moments panel to panel. In fact, I actually added, I think, 8 extra pages to the ending after the campaign was like done and the book was still being worked on. I think Ricardo, the original script for his portion of it was going to be like 72 pages, 76 pages, and then it turned out to be like 80 or 8, something like there's 78, because I added that extra final bit to that final fight, and that is you guys talking about how Twitless, you said, is the action is like a seesaw in this, and in the past 4-5 years, hearing specifically Mike Barron talk about action in comics, his idea always stuck with me, where he would say comic books is like a football game where one person gets the ball, runs it down the field a little bit, the other person grabs it, runs it back the other way, and it's this back and forth that builds the tension until someone makes a touchdown. And thinking about these fight scenes and character points throughout a story, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing stuff like that. Specifically, shout outs to Mike Barron. And go on, Willis.
No, I was going to say, no, that's cool. No, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and shout outs to my artist, dude, Dan Dahl, doing the silhouette and matte black start and then wrapping it up at the end. And you guys talked about kind of the brackets, and this is something that I did in the previous book too, as well. So Lost Pages 2, I started it off with actually Crimstone and Jazz, and then Warwick, the kid, Jazz's kid friend in this one, they meet in the second book, and he runs into the hobo, and then the hobo tells them a story about the silhouette. Working with Dan is freaking awesome. Dan Dahl is one of my favorite people, been phenomenal artist, and he's actually the artist who does the art on the People story. So I just loved working with him. And then Ricardo, I forgot who else said in the chat, but yeah, giving credit to the artist. Ricardo was just phenomenal to work with. He's just a master when you're working with all this action. It's awesome.
When you're working with your art team, how much latitude are you giving the penciler for the layouts?
So I do, and specifically wrote this script, full script. And so like whenever you're seeing a 9-panel grid, I have that in the script, and I have the beats for those panels, and specifically knowing where I want things to go, to give them help with that. But if they have any suggestions or anything, like I've specifically in the silhouette matte black portion that Dan did, I know he added some panels. He's like, hey, he'll send me the layout and be like, I added this panel just for an extra beat. I'm like, that's awesome. Totally cool. But I love the collaborative effort. And over the past few years, meeting these artists and really building a working relationship with them where they're not afraid to be like, hey, what about this? Or would you think about this aspect of something? And something that just pops in their head. I love working like that. And Dan is such a student of comics as well. It's just a joy working with artists like that.
It's interesting that you had all these references for Image Comics, and it seems like you're trying to build your craft around the indie scene, things outside of the mainstream, the big three, I guess, or big two, going back to Image 90s. Do you think you draw influence from Valiant at any point, or Ultraverse, or any of these other offshoot series that might also thematically influence some of your work, not just Image?
No, in fact, I don't think that a lot of my stuff has Image influences. I think that Crimstone specifically does, just because that's that part of my Lost Pages series, but I'd never really read almost any Valiant or Ultraverse stuff. I'm a huge people in my chat think I'm a huge Hard Case fan. Was that from the Ultraverse? Hard Case? No one remembers Hard Case.
Hard Case. It sounds familiar. Hard.
But I'm not. I've like, my influences are all over the place. Like, I'm a huge Swamp Thing, Alan Moore Swamp Thing fan. that whole run is very near to my heart. I'm reading currently old X-Men, the Claremont stuff, and it's really a whole lot of different things from the Shadow, a lot of pulp things, and like you said, Aldous with the Masquerade, and he is one of my favorite characters working on. And I know I hear you, Aldous, that you want more of that, and it's coming. So there's this whole series is laid out in probably 6 books, and each of them is focusing on one character. There's Hard Case. There's my boy.
This is a brutally obscure reference.
Yeah, Hard Case.
Yeah.
I did some. Yeah, I love
Good
his
storytelling. Who worked on this book?
I don't know. Someone.
Okay,
Maybe Aaron Lepresti. I don't know.
maybe.
There's Hard Case.
He's
But
a
no,
good-
I never read any Ultraverse stuff, and a lot of my influences are probably a lot more 80s and 80s comic stuff.
80s comics. So, any series in particular? Well, you said you're reading X-Men now, but
Yeah, I'm going back and reading the X-Men stuff. I love the Vertigo stuff. Like I said, Swamp Thing. I loved Morrison's Doom Patrol. That's more like psychedelic stuff and kind of things that make you think like that. And that's specifically why I wanted to go inside of Jazz's head for this volume, to get more abstract with the world and see what is inside of there, and how Krim reacts to all those things and being back there. And like Doc was saying, this whole story was about now Jasmine is strong again. She's working as a crime fighter. But what happens when her coping mechanism, Krim, the thing that makes her strong, is separated from her, and they have to find their strengths alone again to be reunited?
That was the compelling part of the story for me.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to hit on there.
And you did.
Yeah, thanks.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Cool. Thank you. And to get back to your guys's one of your first points of like how her powers work. Yeah, I can see that it was confusing to start, especially if you didn't have the previous stories to influence your knowledge of the character. In my mind, a lot of what the reader is seeing is Jasmine's imagination. And so when she's seeing Krim in the mirror of her motorcycle, she's just imagining that, right? She's talking to him. No one else sees that. And even in the fire area, and I agree with the fact where like probably shouldn't have had her grabbing JJ, to kind of keep those lines less blurred, and informing the reader. And that was her imagining Krim in the building holding things up as he's warning her.
Yeah.
Right. Well, even if you make him translucent, like it's still a projection, right? He's still there, but it's her imagining him holding it up. Even if he's not holding it up, you can still see the flames behind him, that she's making the assumption that Krim's there with her. And he's, it's the mental projection of I'm safe because Krim's here. Even if Krim's not there, it's in her head. That's the delineation that I think that could have been, make that just a little bit stronger if you're going to do that. But overall, man, Act 1 had a couple of, like I said, small bumps. I think Act 2 and Act 3 are excellent, especially Act 3. I think you hit all the tones you're looking for. At least I'm assuming you're looking for. I'm not in your head, so when I'm reading it, I'm going, okay, this works.
Yeah, and
For sure.
I'll go back and reiterate what I said. None of it pulled me out of the story. I was perfectly willing to just go along wherever the story wanted to lead me and see where it went. And then when it landed, I was like, boom, there it is. No problem.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I wanted to shout out my editors as well. Steve Dye did some editing work for the book. Lee, aka Kimosabi, did some editing work in it. In fact, I had a little birdie, aka my girlfriend, looked over the whole book before it went to print, and I actually added one last page before, and it kind of pushed back printing by like a week. One last page before the whole thing was wrapped, and that's the page with Matt Black at the end there, overhearing the story that was being told by the hobo to connect those two. So shout outs to her.
Oh, that was her idea. Well,
Nice.
good for her, because that was crucial. I feel like that was critical. Now, my wife could give a shit about my comic books.
Now, Phil's girlfriend's a good lady, man. We shared a beer semi recently, about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
times.
How many books is this for you now, Phil?
In total, is it my 7th campaign or 8th? 2 Magic Cops, 2 Lost Pages. Oh, I guess do I count supplemental books?
Yes.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
They're the best of
So-
every campaign they've been on so
Supplemental.
far.
Throw it all on the resume.
People 1 and 2.
Yeah, pad that CV, baby.
Lost Pages. I'm padding. Yeah, padding. Lost Pages 3. Yeah, I mean, I would think with supplemental books, it might be like 9 or 10.
Nice.
That-
And
that's
Doc,
what-
please don't placate Snuggie with his man thing. Love, that's just don't.
Listen. Let me explain it to you. Swamp Thing is the inferior Man
Oh
Thing
my
rules.
goodness.
Oh, Doc, I
Man
love
thing
you, brother, but
rules.
you're
I
killing
love
me
my
right
man
now.
thing.
Dagger to the heart, man.
Love my man thing, just so the chat knows.
Yes, I
Uh,
love my Man Thing as well. I may
See,
have
so-
loved it a bit too much over the years.
You're so yeah, you're pushing like you're pushing seniority level in terms of the number of books you're putting out, Phil, and people struggle to get one out. And I think the reason is like, yeah, there's a lot of enjoyment in creation. There's also a lot of pain that goes into it too, right? It's a struggle to get these things put together and get them out successfully. So what's your inspiration to subject yourself to that kind of sadomasochism over and over again?
Yeah, what went wrong in your head, Phil, to make you want to do comics?
Yeah,
Well,
repeatedly and successfully.
I mean, I just love the medium. And when I was a kid, my brother and I would just come up with stupid characters that, you know, in the back seat driving to the beach or whatever. And I was so inspired by this stuff, I started getting into, like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, that I wanted to kind of, I don't know, inspire the thoughts that I had, that these stories were, you know, putting upon me, and wanted to see if I could do it, and just fell in love with the craft of it and learning more about it, and working with amazing artists now, learning more about layouts, and just I fell in love with it. So I love character creation, and that's
Phil,
all this stuff's worth it, you know.
Yeah, that's all wonderful, but then you run up against the reality of making a fucking book.
Yeah, yeah,
And-
but
And all the nightmares that go with it.
but the struggle is awesome. I enjoy
Yeah.
the craft of it and learning new things like building a campaign, putting trails together, lettering, because I letter all my own stuff, and, you know, kind of marketing, which is the most drudgeful part of it, I would say, that a lot of people don't have to do, but when you're going into the crowdfunding space, that's a must know. So like
Yeah.
that process is enjoyable for me. And the big payoff is stuff like this, like reviews, seeing what people take from the stories and
Yeah.
what I could take to further the craft and kind of grow and learn and improve upon that. In fact, one of the points you guys brought up was like Crim's letters being muddy, or, you know, what you guys were saying. And actually, this book was the first time I heard that from readers, and it's the same lettering that I created for the first two. So I'm actually thinking of doing something different for the next book that we're doing, which is actually a crossover that Crim's going to be in. And so I'm going to do the letters again. So I don't know if I should change it completely or see if I could
Just
make
tweak
them
it a little.
cleaner.
Yeah, just tweak it a little.
I think it was
Yeah.
I think it was the context that prior to this, I don't remember the context being as important in the grand structure.
All
I think
right.
it was just how it was included within the story, that it was more part of the story itself, that,
For sure.
and it seemed more pronounced, that there were
Yeah.
moments where it was just like, and even if it was the same font, man,
Mhm.
sometimes you run into that where it's just the font, where you pick a word and suddenly the word doesn't come across as well when you print it because of the font. So it could have
yeah.
been that.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of those major things, but I think it is something that just consider in the next installment for sure.
Yeah.
It just needs a little tweaking. It doesn't need to be changed, because you definitely get the idea this guy's got an unworldly voice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, one of the high points for me was when it's the skull and crossbones and the word balloon. When you're so metal that it can't be translated, that fucking rocked.
Yeah, I wanted that spread to just kick you in the face, be like, he's now stepping into reality.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of, definite Motorhead vibe there.
Well, it goes back to that, like the Savage Sword of Conan days, when you just get like just an exclamation point as an action, because there doesn't need to be anything else said. It's just he's dropping that fucking sword on somebody's head, and it's just exclamation point. Because you don't need an arg, you don't need anything. You just need some indication that there's a scream, and it doesn't matter what it is. Fill it in your own head. What would that statement be? That's part of the magic of comics. That's why this works so well.
Yeah, for sure. And I couldn't be happier with working with Ricardo on this. Like, he loves that 90s style as well, and he is so great at drawing monsters. And the actual way that I was introduced to him, of course, I'd seen his work because he's done a lot of work with Matt Fowler. He did Dixie Rose, and Matt had actually, if you guys grabbed the physical copy, I don't know if I have a part of it. I might have it right here. He did the foil card. Actually, I don't have it, but the foil card was Crim, Reaper Destroyer, and Tiger Blue, and that's the first time that Ricardo had ever drawn the character.
Nice.
Like, oh man, this is so badass. So Matt hooked me up with his info, and we did some sketches and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, your version of Crim is so visceral. And I'm doing these like little gremlin guys that are gonna be inside the mine too. And he killed those, and he's just so excellent at drawing visceral monsters, with, and then Wasteoid was perfect.
Yeah, Wasteoid was a fucking home run, man.
Absolutely, man.
What a great
villain. The book itself is a solid triple. I mean, it's a really well, but Wasteoid, from the colors to the line work, man, full home run. It executed perfectly. If you're going for that Carnage, Violator, Venom mix of a bad guy, that neon green, that radiation green is just such a fantastic. It crawls off the page and oozes onto your hands, and you want to get it off. It's so well done.
Yeah, I really wanted him to be like the mirror character for Crim and Jazz, and to the point where, Crim's that purple beast, and specifically made him green because it's that contrast right on the other side of the color wheel. And I knew in the fights in my head would look so attractive with that contrast against each other. And shout outs to Tommy Patterson, who did the initial design for the character, just off of the sentence of, I want a toxic waste monster who has eyes for teeth and teeth for eyes. And he just freaking destroyed it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean that is that is an iconic villain that
Thank you. Thank you.
I pray you will dip back into that well more than once.
Yes, I hope so too. I'm pretty sure we will. It's a badass. Yeah, and then with that final fight scene, I'm just like, all right, well, I got to see what this guy could do, and just had him, show off his abilities and shit and his fighting style. So, yeah, I had a blast, and thank you guys for digging into it. I appreciate it.
You're also a young guy, like not to age you or anything. No ageism, but why aren't you doing manga? Why do
What?
90s comic?
My
Yeah.
God, all this, can you chastise this man for
What did you grow up reading?
I-
What did you grow up
I-
reading?
You know, I'll slap.
What were
him
you
for
buying off the
Phil.
newsstands, Bill? That's what I want to know.
Well,
I'll kick his ass backstage.
thank you. No, manga and anime, it's not something that I grew up, ingesting. The art style similarity across, different mangas and animes was a turnoff to me when I was young. And just the Western stuff was just so much more visceral. You fight onto that. And, specifically having star artists that had different styles from each other was really attracted to me. So it's not something that I was ever used to until very recently. If I actually watched some anime films and read like one reading through a manga on and off currently. But the art style is pretty fast and different. But yeah, so I know that it's immensely popular. It's because the industry over there is pretty much built on merit. They have a voting system in their magazines, which is, something that us Western creators dream of, because you have that the best quality stuff is going to rise to the top, which is super hard to do in an art field of any kind, any entertainment field. But I did take a stab at it in my, see if I have one of the books in the first book supplemental for the Lost Pages. Have any of these books readily available? I did a character
room, Phil.
I know, it's a mess.
Get your Jordan Peterson book.
Here it is. No, that's not it. Here it is. I did a character called Drift Legend in my Myths of the Lost Pages, and that was a supplemental book that was 4-page stories introducing characters that we added more stories to the book as add-ons to, or not add-ons, but stretch goals for the campaign. I actually did this character that was drawn by Kyung Lee. You remember Battle Maiden Knucklebomb?
Oh yeah.
Kyung did freaking amazing story, and he was so fun to work with. So this character actually lives in the Lost Pages universe, and he's a crime fighter that is super intelligent, and he uses like geometry to fight, and Kyung just killed it on this. So manga fans really dug this, and I would like to do a series of this character in the future, but he'll probably make some cameos in future volumes of the Lost Pages down the line. But yeah,
You gotta. I said it before. You've got to get rich so that you can hire a
I heard you.
team.
I heard you, Doc. I agree. That would be amazing.
It's like I lament that I have more stories than I have life left to tell.
I'm sure that's a lot of us.
That's the nature of a good creator, though, where you're not locked in on one thing and you're constantly coming up with more, and you wish you had that opportunity. But that's the benefit and the curse, right? Because from that you have to distill out your best ideas, and that's where you get
right
what you are able to put down on the page, unless we get somebody that's willing to do some kind of great anthology where they're reaching out to creators and give me a couple shorts, which sadly have not resonated much, but I would certainly love to see more of, because that's where the gold truly comes from. I mean, think about it. All the great characters that we have today that we look back on that are almost a century old at this point, from Superman to Batman to Spider-Man, came from anthology books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, That's
Yeah,
true.
but did you miss Well Red's recommendation that maybe you needed a Jordan Peterson book in there?
I mean,
All right.
back then, the Clean Your Room, that was inspirational for, Phil's generation. So it's quite the motivator.
I heard that while it slid by everybody, and I had to mute and laugh.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking because, like the manga and that whole genre was probably saturating your formidable years and far more accessible. So you probably had to go out of your way. You found those anthology books to get the Spider-Man and the X-Men stories, right? Or was there some other method that you were accessing all of this Western?
No,
media?
well, so I'm 30. I'm going to be 31 in September.
Oh, never mind. You're old.
Yeah, I'm not Noah's age. So I was watching X-Men animated series. A big part of
I resent that.
a big part of my youth was Bruce Timm's Justice League animated series, Justice League Unlimited, and then getting into comics through a friend when I was doing theater, and he was like a Wednesday warrior. Like he's like, "Oh, come look at this stuff," and he had in his trunk of his car was just stacks of, or not even stacks, just loose comics. He's like, "Yeah, this is what I do every Wednesday. I go and buy comics." And he's like, he made a list for me. You need to buy Joker from Brian Azzarello. You need to buy all these, of course, The Dark Knight, Batman Year One, friggin' all the essential stuff. And then I started going back from there, and Swamp Thing, and then got introduced to Eric Powell's stuff and the Shadow.
Hell yeah, when they call out Eric Powell.
Yeah. And who is KSSS in the chat? Fan of the Hillbilly? I love the Hillbilly, which is a new
The
series.
Hillbilly is fantastic.
So good, man. And like even that
the
stuff.
Goon, I mean, there's a lot of the Goon that leaves a lot to be desired. And Twitless, shut the fuck up for a minute. But
I think he died actually. So.
Did he? Oh well, we can all hope.
Yeah.
But the Goon, man, there are 2 or 3 individual series in the Goon that are absolutely fantastic. That really scream to Powell's territory. But the Hillbilly is like oh my god! I think it's his magnum opus. It's fantastic.
I agree, and there's stuff that that from that series that influences me and some new IPs that you're going to be seeing from us probably next year. I'm doing this Western fantasy that I'm really excited about, and I'm already a number of pages in with art. So a lot of most of the money that we get from the crowdfunders, and especially from like when we helped Cecil fulfill, we put that into art for upcoming projects because kind of doubling down on the stories that we want to get out there. So I can't wait to
man,
show you guys more of that stuff.
You think you'll do that,
dude? I mean, you said the magic word. You said Western. So I mean, anybody that listens to any of my shit on a regular basis knows I'm a Western whore, and so do well, because the critique hammer comes down a lot harder in that genre, because
I'm excited.
It's so often done, but so rarely done well.
Yeah. I got fingers crossed on that. I'm putting a lot into that. I did like a whole timeline for the story, and really want all my ducks in the row for when I start putting that stuff out.
Western is really hard to do well because there's so much nuance in Western.
Mm-hmm.
You really got to know how to play with the subtleties there. Right, Twitless? When is your Western magnum opus coming out?
It'll be a while.
To write a Western play.
Pink covered wagons on the Oregon Trail. It'll be beautiful.
I'll just copy Lucky Luke. That's what I'll do. Just go for the real pros.
Ooh. Man, did you just try to throw shade at Lucky Luke?
No, I was praising Lucky Luke.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
Are you sure?
You think you'll ever do fulfillment again, Phil, after the last experience with Cash Grab?
Yeah, I'd love to do it again.
That was a pretty big campaign too.
Yeah.
Sure, you guys had a huge undertaking.
It was.
Who was,
Speaking for myself, I can say that the delivery methodology that Phil issued for my copy of Cash Grab was absolutely fantastic. My issue was hand delivered in a parking lot, handed to me. Both books were bagged and boarded independently, and given to me with grace and comfort. So
Yeah.
And then they were stolen from you right afterwards, right? As it should be.
We aim to
no, shockingly they were not.
You mean they weren't just loose in the trunk of a car?
They were not loose in the trunk of a car, nor were multiple books placed in the same bag. It's a strange concept when you get people that appreciate comics fulfilling books. They tend to do them the right way.
So you missed out on the sandwich bags that Wenger was using.
No, I did not. I actually was one of the few that got the Wenger the Wenger Ziploc. I still have pictures somewhere of that one.
Or the shipping
But at
label
least
slapped
you
on the
bagged
back
it,
of the
right?
book. Yeah, like the shipping label slapped on the back of the book that I think World Class Bullshitters did for.
I was stealing
Yeah,
solo.
yeah. I
missed
never
that.
backed stealing solo. That never seemed right.
Hmm.
There was nothing about it that seemed entertaining. So
I'm gonna let that
looking
silence
back
the
on it
tank.
5 years later, I regret it. But because it'd
That
be
needs to be
something to have that just to drop.
That needs to
Here's
be
my book with the postal sticker on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that needs to be a backer incentive now. You know, you pay extra. You pay extra to get that tier.
Yeah, for the bags and boards and the Gemini mailer, pay extra.
I mean, somebody's got to set the standard for the worst, right?
Yeah. Makes everybody else look good.
Yeah,
One guy takes one for the team. So
yeah. I mean, that was a valuable community service.
yeah. Well, what's your thoughts on the future of crowdfunding, Phil? Are you going to continue with this model, or do you think at some point you might have to work with a publisher to keep going the way you are?
No, I mean, I guess eventually, but I think we're going to continue to crowdfund. I really like what some guys are doing. Like, if you look at Adam Lawson, he's crowdfunding his books, getting them done, and then seemingly trying to work with a publisher to get them into stores. And that's a prospect that is intriguing to me, because I would love a wider audience, you know, that of people that go to stores to buy comics, you know. So my thought is, like, if you're in stores, you're gonna get some people buying them. I know there's like a totally if you do Image, it's a lot of self-marketing, very much so like how crowdfunding is. You kind of are the marketing force until, you know, knock on wood, your book becomes a hit in Image, and then they'll start pushing it out themselves because they have interest in it. Or working with a smaller publisher that has the interest to market for you and get your stuff into previews. There's also the alternative of doing it yourself, paying to have your book solicited in previews, and then doing the groundwork there. I think the way Adam's doing it is intriguing to me, and it doesn't cut out crowdfunding. So I like that, having crowdfunding help get that book made, and then that second venture of using that work that's already printed, already paid for, to cast a wider net into stores.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. I agree with you on the process, but I disagree with you on who to look to. Because if I go to my local shop, if I go to the dollar bin, I find a lot of copies of Lawson's books on Exiles. I don't find much 656. I think the way to go is 656. I think their marketing program is much better. I think they've got a much better understanding of how local shops are looking for books, and everything that they do flies off the shelves at local shops. Plus, they have the added benefit of and they're working with Irene right now for doing multilingual stuff. They can translate your book over into Spanish and then expose you to the Spanish market. No matter what your politics are, you have to understand that there is a huge market for Spanish books. Um, and at this point, it's a capitalistic venture. You want to be exposed to the vast market that is possible.
Yeah.
Man, I encourage everybody, if you've got a good book, if you really think you've got something, reach out to 656, because those guys, they killed it with cryptidinals in the previews. They killed it with orders. It didn't stay on the shelf, and they offer that added bonus of pay them a little bit more. They'll translate it for you, and then they can push it in their secondary markets as they're going into that, northern Mexico, southern Texas market share of where they're hitting cons and
Yeah,
moving
I love
product,
that.
because they do move product. And
That's
yeah, as Nail
interesting.
Bunny says, Portuguese as well. The Brazilian market, everybody talks about. We're gonna. A lot of guys use Brazilian artists. The Brazilian market is a boom, and
Yeah.
nobody has really reached out there yet. So you've
Ricardo's
got the
Brazilian.
Central American, the South American market. You just got to figure out distribution. You need to get a hold of somebody that's got physical representation down there. And if you can get it translated, it'll sell, because a lot of these books are so much better than what's being offered in the mainstream.
Well, what's
Yeah.
the end goal then? To like produce a lot of books and sell to foreign markets, or did you want your work to be eventually adapted into other media?
I think I mean, especially with the Lost Pages, like I know where it's going. Like I said, there's a 6-book arc right now that everything's leading up to, and that last book might be split into 2 volumes. And I mean, that's what I'm focusing on now with that. Our other IPs like Magic Cop and this Western that I'm gearing up for. The focus right now is getting that stuff out there, and I guess the end goal for me is really casting that wider net, and trying to do what the 656 guys are doing it, and Adam, because right now and right now I'm actually looking at digital stuff. Like Irene has turned me on to Global Comics, which does a really, really cool job at laying out kind of like a unique feel of reading digital comics through their app and even in browser. So I've been playing around with putting some content on there for even more, I guess, modern take on comic readers, because digital is a huge market. And I was just talking about this with my brother recently. If you're not tapping into that, I mean, I think it's obvious that the younger generation is reading comics and manga digitally for the most part.
Mhm.
And what happens in 40 years when all the Gen Xers can't read anymore because they need glasses, or
Or they're
Right.
dead.
yeah, or they're dead.
Well,
Or they're
I can speak on that a little bit.
Easy killer.
Yeah, my co-host on the Gutter, which is Friday nights at 11:30 over on Lord Crackhead's Comic Talks channel.
Yeah.
JP Raiden Radio. Everybody loves his book Eudaimonia.
Yeah.
He put Eudaimonia Volume 1 up on Global Comics as a
Right.
digital read for free, and he has seen a 40 to 60% increase on signups for Volume 3 since he's done that. So
Wow.
it's a significant amount of people that are interested and will carry over if you're producing a good product. And these are people that are not on Twitter. These are actual comic buyers that will read your material, which is different than people that will buy your material, which sounds a little bit weird. But if you've been in the
No.
scene for any length of time, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's 2 markets, and what you're looking for are actual readers, and it's significant to throw it out there. So if you've got something that's 5-6 years old that you can put up, by all means do so. And thank you, my God, for putting this up, because this is the highlight. And let me take, man, I can't compliment this enough. If you join the Zaid Comics channel, you get a strip that is on the Masquerade, which is their best character. And the way they present this is fantastic, because it's a glorious throwback to not just comic strips, but also how characters used to be presented. And Phil and I have talked about this numerous times in person. on what he's doing with this character. And this is why I'm pissed at him that he doesn't do more, because what he's doing in the background for this is fantastic. And Phil, take a little bit of time and tell people about what this is.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. So like you said, if you join the channel as a member, you get access to these strips. And recently I put this up as like a secret link on Global Comics. So no one else has access to it except for our channel members, and they can just click on the link and it takes you to this viewer, and you can go panel by panel, which you as the creator get to discern where the panel highlights are. And yeah, the Masquerade, one of my favorite characters from the Lost Pages. He's based in the 1930s. He's a throwback to pulp heroes like the Shadow and the Phantom. And he is kind of like stage one for heroes in my Lost Pages Chicago. Like, he's the first hero of the city. He's a master of disguise, a theater actor by day, like very famous theater actor. And by night, he is the Masquerade. He's got a lounge singing hot babe girlfriend that gets in distress all the time that he has to save. And we're doing a serialized comic strip on the channel for channel members. We've been doing it, whenever Alan Alonso, the Howl Comics, gets, some free time to draw the strips. And we've been having a lot of fun with it, kind of just expanding upon his mythos behind the scenes here, adding some new side characters, supporting characters, stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. It's definitely an outlet for that pulpy side of my heart. And he's a huge character, very important character in the Lost Pages. So if you guys dig the series, he is going to be coming up in a big bad way and for the whole thing. Super fun. He also speaks in rhyme too. He's like speaks in Shakespearean iambic pentameter rhyme to mock his foes.
This is your cue, Twitless, to sing Masquerade from Phantom of the Opera. Go.
We definitely need some more super chats for that.
Yeah, definitely doing something digital is the way to go, because the younger readership is glued to their phones, and they're not going to go pick up a physical book. They just want everything accessible there, all their entertainment. And
right, yeah. And I really dig what the guys at Global Comics are doing. They're super attentive to creators and creators' needs. They do updates to the site all the time. They're implementing a scroll feature, so if you're more used to reading web comics, they have that, and they're also partnering with creators for doing like exclusive series. I think I heard recently that Tyler from Draw and Talk has like a partnered series with them, and they're also adapting modern comics from indie publishers and reformatting them into more scroll features style. So they're playing around with getting more viewers and readers on their platform.
I wonder with the scroll feature, could you do the choose your own adventure approach and like scroll to the part of the story that you want to pursue?
Would change, make decisions, gamify it.
Yeah,
be interesting
interactions there. Cool, Phil. Well, we're hitting over 2 hours, so that's usually a good place to stop, so that people have a complete stream that they can check out. Is there anything else that we can check out from you coming up in the future?
If you guys have not read any of my previous titles, the stuff we've done at Zade Comics, stuff with my brother like Magic Cop or the previous Lost Pages, we have everything that we've done, even stuff from the newest campaign, on our site, zadecomics.com. We've actually compiled the previous Lost Pages stories into a digest or manga-sized book. It's 212 pages. The first book, supplemental book, and then Lost Pages 2 in a grayscale format for $20. So we were able to get the price point down for people. And then if you're looking for the next stuff we're going to do, you can just come over to the site and sign up for our newsletter, which we do like once a month. And it's going to tell you about all the new stuff we're coming out with. So the next book we're doing is this one here, Psycho Slumber, which is a crossover between the Lost Pages and the Kill Journal. So it's imagine Crimstone in like an 80s slasher movie. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The book is basically drawn. We're crowdfunding it to get it colored, lettered, printed, and has an amazing Rob Willis cover. We're going to have a variant on it as well by one of my favorite artists. So stay tuned for that. And that should be launching probably in the next month and a half. We're just getting some colored pages in now for the campaign.
Very cool.
That's where you can find me.
Drop the link for you in the chat, zadecomics.com.
Yes.
Psycho Slumber, that cover looks great. So
yeah,
that's something people should check out.
Super excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Doc, I saw you dropped your link. Damn Dirty Thing.
Yes, I'm
Pariah
on
story. Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, go for it.
I did. Yeah. Damn Dirty Thing funding right now on Fund My Comic. It's an open storefront, but I'd like to get a little more movement on it, man. I want to get we're about to do a complete fulfillment of everyone that's ordered. Everything's finished. But I would still like to hit that stretch goal to be able to do the audio book of the novella. So please consider giving it a look and investing. I kept the prices really cheap. $7 for the comic book, $9 for the novella.
Damn.
Well, Doc, I will volunteer. I love that book, man. It's right in my alleyway. If you need any help with the audiobook, let me know.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to bring it up, but the link is a little slow. So apologies that I'm not showing the campaign. Speaking of cheap, good reads, Twitless also has a series that's print on demand and a really good read. Twitless,
Yeah.
Wake up, Twitless, you're on.
Oh my gosh. Check out The Adventures of Omega Girl. Definitely influenced by classic superhero stories from Golden, Silver, and even Bronze Age a bit.
Very cool. Thank you, everybody. It's great to hear about all of your projects. Great to hear about all the work that Phil's been doing, his plans for the future.
Thanks, man.
More, Phil. So
yeah. Thanks for having me, guys, and thanks for reading. Hopefully, whenever you guys have another thing, I heard you. Bancroft was asking if you're doing the People as well, and I remember Twitless was on the panel when you guys did the first People. So, and you mentioned it to me when I met you in Tampa, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we'd love to do the People as well in the future. Probably going to do Yaira next. I've been itching to get to that book, so it's going to be a fun review. But still a lot more coming up, a lot more things to discuss. It never ends, Phil. It never ends. There's so many books.
That's good.
Keeping us so busy all
Fantastic
the
thing.
time. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I love what you do here, and I've been watching your reviews for years, so I dig the dynamic, and I always tune into this stuff. So we need more people doing reviews, and so I know that people are actually reading these things.
We need people doing honest reviews.
Yes,
not people doing page shill reviews, which are a thing, unfortunately. Please don't whore yourselves out. It doesn't benefit the creators or the customers. Just give your honest opinions. Don't chase any clout. That clout is fleeting. So do something of substance, everyone. With that, we'll close it up. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, reviewers. Thank you, panel. Thank you, chat. It's great to see all of you.
Hail the chat, as always. You guys rock.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Say thank you for grace. Thank you for mercy. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for wisdom. Thank you for parents. Thank you for love. Thank you for kindness. Thank you for humility. Thank you for peace. Thank you for prosperity. Say thank you in advance for what's already yours.